Hello and welcome to Experiment Lab, the daily show with JK. I'm JK, your host, and I'm joined by Elias. Right, Elias,
Hey,
how are you?
I'm pretty good. I'm going through some current news to see how messed up the world is today. Comparatively, it's about what I expect.
Yes, as a continuation, right? So we had a group meeting. Our team was there like yesterday, and also um, Walter was there. Many people come and go, so that's for sure. But you and me probably will do a longer run. So we will be talking about issues and from the standpoint of what we were doing yesterday, right? I just want to clear some air, right? So still people will not understand fully on the background what is happening over there and how this experiment helping people all together, right? So I just wanted to share that like quick and then not to keep it long. Uh, so this is something through that process. Shiva has got an interview, right, for a client interview and client interview. So I don't want like to share much more information because we want to keep that for members only, and also not YouTube taking us down every time we do the show. They just remove the content saying that like it amounts to cyberbullying or harassment, and you cannot share personal information of people and all those things. That point I wanted to talk, Elias, right? So we are doing an experiment, right? It is an exclusive one, very unique, which nobody has done, right? Again, this is something we cannot broadcast, right? Because it endangers the privacy of many people involved in that. So my question to you, so then how do we approach these kind of investigations and undercover operations?
General,
Yes, in general, like let's talk about in general.
first you got to know what the purpose is for any kind of project. There's different phases of a what you're talking about, what the purpose is, what the audience is, um, what your steps are that you take towards your goal, doing research, finding out who needs to be involved, and getting feedback, I guess. Once you even start the process of whatever project it is, you need to have a way to respond to feedback or criticism or results so that you can continue to improve the project.
So interestingly, right? So I just showed one quick glimpse of the calendar invite for the interview for Shiva, right? So for this process that we have been doing it like for quite some time, but the uniqueness on this one, why do we target all the companies is they just mentioned that it's a video discussion, it's a video interview, and also they asked us like to join 5 minutes to avoid any technical issues and requests. I don't find any problem with those things, but they mentioned that like please be ready with your government ID card ready to display at the beginning of the interview. So this was something like very surprising thing for me, and it looks very odd. You don't even trust a person, and then why do you want like to hire that person?
If it's just talking about taking your driver's license out of your wallet and showing it to the camera just to show that you are who you say you are, I don't think they can steal that for anything.
So have we reached that point? That's my question here, right? So human to human trust has gone, right? You just want like some ID, right? If I have to fake, I can fake an ID also. We all know that, right? People do that as well. What's the big deal in that? And how will you validate that? Just for a few seconds, like showing it on the camera.
Well, it's not a validation process, it's a screening process.
Yes,
If they wanted to like confirm whether or not your ID was real, they would go through a more stringent process. But
exactly,
if
right.
it's just to like confirm that you have an ID, they're not going to check whether or not your ID is fake.
Exactly, my point is that, right? So, or even for the other profiles we have set it up, right? Even for Nate or even for Shiva or even other profiles, that we get selected and we get the offer, we go through the rigorous process of background verification, right? So that's why like background verification companies are there. They do run the criminal background check, employment history, and residence history, where and all you stayed, and even SSN trace, all that they do it even before getting into any project. So when that is the case, I find this like more, I don't know what to say, like it's silly, absurd in a way that like you don't even trust the person, you just want them like to show, you are like doing a moral policing, right? So just because it is more prevalent, more people are doing fraud, to track them, you will go in the wrong direction. That is what like my concern is, right? So anything that the corporates do, that becomes their right. And if same individual does, it becomes wrong, right? So if I am going to fake my resume, if I'm going to lie and get a job, that is wrong morally. How does that become wrong? When you are not again, there is, to eliminate that scope, that is why like we have the legal system, right? You cannot discriminate people based on all those things, right? That is a useless thing, right? Going and complaining to the EEOC, equal employment opportunity, those are just for the namesake. My understanding is like, as a big corporate, why can't you invest and do things in a proper way rather than jumping the gun and saying that like, oh, I am screening it, I want to verify, you show your ID, it has all my information, my address, my date of birth, everything, right? Why do you need all those things like just for screening? And you're not a cop, right? Stopping in a traffic sign, or for even cops, right? When you violate, like they stop. It's like generally random check, right? You stop somebody and ask them to show the ID. I understand those things. For security reason, we can do that. How come for job purpose, you can jump the gun like this?
I don't know. Just seems like one of an infinite number of other corporate actions that may be iffy. But again, I'm not an expert on hiring practices. And I feel like I've given my input on what those companies do. Not much I can really add to that.
Absolutely right. We cannot do anything again on these things. So I hate to say this, right? So even with those stringent measures, they are trying to fool around, right? If you are trying to bring a gun to a knife fight, right? Or if I'm aware and like I don't have anything and I don't want to fight, you are bringing in the fight with me. So then I can also prove that like what I am capable of, right? So you cannot win an argument, or you cannot fight with someone without making yourself ready to fight with them, right? So it's like, I don't know how to put this, right? Yeah, you do whatever you want, I will do whatever I want. Is that how like we have to exist?
Sure. Although I don't know how well you can stop companies from doing certain legal to illegal adjacent actions without getting involved legally, because ultimately anything that is to be a long-term solution either needs to be codified or at the very least made well enough known by exposure. I don't know if you can necessarily fight the company using its own methods. It's not exactly going to put them out of business. At the end of the day, law enforcement needs to get involved in any issue that you want to be a long-term solution.
That's right. You're correct in that terms, right? So in terms of any action that needs to be taken by the law enforcement or any agencies that is prosecuting these companies can only stop this, right? So unless we bring in this awareness and again promote it, saying that like this is what is every other company is doing, and they get to know that, right? And they will stop. Ultimately, someone brings this story, the argument they make, right? This is not the first time, right? Why I'm getting frustrated on this issue is like, in the short period in the experiment that we have been doing, like for almost every time we come across, they ask this in the recent past that like, we need you to show your face, come on camera. And also they don't show up their face. That's a beauty, right? And also they said like, one of our teammates, like he kind of poked them around saying that like, what kind of rule is this, right? I will show my face and you guys will not show. And then he said like, no, we are screening you and we have security issues and we don't have to show our face. It is you who are seeking the job, so you have to listen to us and show your face. Otherwise, like, you can leave. They just said that.
Yeah.
It was rude again, right? It is like you are going and asking for a job is like, are you surrendering yourself? Are you begging for anything? No. It is your common courtesy and business ethics, right? You have
Yeah. Doesn't sound uncommon though.
standard practices can be established, right? Again, in person, face to face, that's a whole different story, right? Nobody can fake it or do these kind of frauds. And for their side, right, I understand the justification, right? They go through a lot of candidates for
But even
one.
if they show themselves on camera, then what? What does that change?
That's exactly my point, right? So that is what we did, right? So we did a profile change, and he showed up his face, he cleared the interview, but he is not that person. He's a different person altogether. It's not original person. And what are you going to do? Like, how are you going to validate? So if you are going to mess up with the system, we can still screw you up. That's my point. My point is, don't be arrogant, right? Don't think that like you are right all the time. That's my message to the corporates, right? So follow through the legal system, establish some standards, right? Again, it is not something for us to say, right? It is their job. It is their business. They can do whatever they want. We have no objection to it. But treating the other humans in a fair manner, that is where like we lose, I don't know, human dignity in this process.
Well, that we lose dignity whenever we work for someone else in general, I guess. That's just capitalism. That's just in general. I mean, whether or not individual corporate actions are humiliating or not. I mean, yeah, in general, we don't have the best relationships with companies. They don't exactly, it's from their end. They don't exactly treat people very well in general. But that's an overarching thing. That's for everything.
So that leads to the next question, right? So then, as humans, right, we will not change, or is change is possible? Are we heading towards betterment of human civilization or human race? What is your take on that?
Depends on the time scale. I mean, over the past few hundred years, we've definitely progressed. In the last few years, probably we've gone backwards a bit. But in the long run, I think we're probably gonna improve. But I can't tell how many steps forward versus how many steps backwards we take at one time. But over a long period of time, on average, I think we're improving. But you can never tell in the short term.
Yeah, it's kind of a pendulum, right? We are going back and forth. I do agree on that. We have made a huge progress and a leap jump in the last 100 years. That's for sure. All right. So the technology and the advancement, everything has really shaken us to the core, at least even in the last 20, 30 years. It's totally a different world altogether. The humans are still struggling to catch up with that. That's how like I see. And you are being more optimistic on that. But my question,
I don't know if I'm being optimistic about that. I mean, it's still happening. The same things are happening.
Yes, same things are happening over and over. And is it related to the problem of learning the history and getting reminded of constantly of what we are, and assuming ourselves like that is what we are and that is how like we have to deal with? And my question here, like, then how do people get so agitated and they become activists or they start protesting? How is those things in action takes place, right? Because I have not been a activist in my life, or even if this is considered to be an activist job, like I would say, like this is my first, and I've never been in any protest or anything like in my 55 years of my living in this world. So I'm
You're
still
asking
wondering,
how people can do activism?
yes, how do they get involved in that? Like what point they just decide in their life, okay, enough is enough. Like I am going to protest and I'm going to.
Well, it depends on the individual. I assume that they either became upset at what happened to them or to what's happening to their group or what's happening to people in general. Normally it happens over a longer period of time where one might consistently be bombarded with news of a specific corporate injustice, and then they might protest that. I mean, what have been more recent protests? The biggest one I can think of right now is, what's happening right now in the news is there's protests in China. So let me see some news about that, because that's actually very modern. I mean, conditions all over the world, it's basically, if you don't like the conditions you're in, and you can locate the source of inequity or injustice. China COVID protesters become targets of Beijing surveillance state. This is Wall Street Journal. I don't know what that headline is about, but I guess people are upset about how they have been and are currently treated for COVID policies, which is not unusual. But there seems to be a lot of people protesting. The streets of Beijing near the site of Sunday's protest are almost entirely deserted, besides for police. So I guess the state is great at cracking down. The government, the students said the police told him to take the comment down. Quote, "The Chinese government's control over free speech has reached an unprecedented level." I mean, that's the case. I mean, in the United States as well, there's the railway strike, with a bunch of railroad unions striking all together because there's like 4 companies in the United States that deal with the railway industry. So they're trying to get better rights, and they have not been able to come to an agreement. And if they shut down, the entire country shuts down. That's where everything comes from, is from trains. That's how they get goods around. I live right next to train tracks. Stuff goes through there every day, all day. That's just how they get goods around into the inner non water locked land. No, there's no better way to get places than by water. But besides that, you got trains and buses, and we don't even have enough railway in the country. It's because companies don't feel like they'll make profit by building up entirely new systems. And they also want to take advantage of all their workers for as much as possible, treating them badly, giving them bad working conditions. And there's tens of thousands of railroad workers. And if they feel like they can't, have enough time off for vacation, or the conditions that they're working in are terrible, or they're not being paid enough, or any one of a number of things. I mean, this strike the threat of the strike has been going on for a very long time. So it's not like any of these issues are new. It's that companies know they can get away with treating workers poorly, and they know that they'll get bailed out if they don't back down because their services are necessary. It's only if the government specifically takes the side of the workers, whether the protesters protest for long enough or, shut down productivity for long enough. But usually governments take the side of the corporations because they make them money.
Yeah, absolutely. Again, one more thing, like I just wanted to remind, right? So our team is like following up on that, how forced labor and transparency has to be there on the supply chains. So it's an international webinar on human trafficking, and it's going on. So it's a recorded one, like we can play this out maybe in the coming days or in the weekend during our Stop Now program. So all I just wanted to share that is like how these organizations, right, different countries at international level, like this is based in, I think, UK and New Zealand, they are reporting on this. Even in terms of cooperation and collaboration with different organizations, for us, like to explore this, this is prevalent thing, right? So we all know that like this is going to be always I'm right versus you're wrong kind of approach, right? The problem between even at an individual level gets escalated at the company level and the corporate level and the governments and with the systems and policies. So that is where like the struggle is, like where do we draw the line? And
Well,
certainly,
even if we draw the line, what happens? Which part of the
but
system changes just because you draw a line?
that's exactly the point is, right? So even if we draw the line, so you just get split between that and fight. So that is an ongoing thing to
Oh yeah,
have.
it's certainly a debate between violent action and non-violent action. That's what the debate is. At which point do protests become more violent? When things become more extreme? Protests are almost always peaceful, and then the angrier people get, and the more extreme things get, the more poorly people are treated, the worse people's conditions are, the more individual actors will take violent action. And that's only going to continue getting worse until the underlying material conditions are reviewed and addressed.
So that is something, right? So we are mixing up everything here, like to talk about, but then solution wise, right? I still not convinced, right? We are not going to
Oh yeah,
provide any solution, right? We are not uh, uh, in power to, or in law enforcement or anything for that matter, like in the justice system to think about providing a solution at a social level. So then where is the opportunity for us to go further, right? So what we can do is the maximum create an awareness or uh, raise the voice and publish these stories. And also my concern is like everybody even talk about that, right? What if we are constantly being attacked or taken down, or we are forced to shut down? Then what happens? How far can you go? So many of them like have questioned me this, but I don't have an answer for that.
yeah. I don't think anyone does. It's up to the individual and the organizations that provide structures for people to do activism. I know there's in most areas there's groups to join, clubs, political organizations. There's always issues to address, whether it's local houselessness or hunger, to education, to just protesting in general, standing up against right-wing politicians in any circumstance, voting, doing what one can. A lot of the time an individual can't do very much in the grand scheme of things, especially when you've got a whole bunch of politicians and rich people walking around and doing whatever they want. So yeah, I don't know if there's not really anything an individual can do besides for the small amount that they can contribute to their local environment. And that's fine. That's good. People should do more in their local environment. People should go to protests. People should get more involved where they can. A lot of the time people can't because they need to make money. And that just feeds back into that subservience to corporations. That people are trapped working for them because if they ever skip a day to protest or to vote, they might get fired or lose too much money to pay the rent that month. And that's what stops people from voting. That's what stops people from protesting or socializing or doing anything. You work a 9 to 5. You don't exactly have much time to do much else, or even longer than that.
Yes, I can not agree more to that, right? That's the reason even people don't want to even step forward or speak up or stand up and say like, oh, I'm even to address the issue or file a complaint, right? So they will end up losing their job, or the legal status in this case for, I don't know how far they can have rights in that, right? So those things, as you said before, I still fondly remember that, like, we are not an expert in any of those things. We have to invite experts and ask these tough questions to them and see like if they can enlighten us with some answers, because I'm still not convinced with what we are doing in the experiment and how we are approaching it. Though the projects are going well and we are able to manipulate things and try to show to the world that, like, see, this is what is happening in the corporate world. Corporate crimes and scams are being exposed here. But do we have solution to that? Not really, right? That's a sad.
Yeah. So whatever the most effective option is at any point in time. My advice is for anyone looking to do any kind of activism, the most effective thing you could do is just use existing social media followings. Like if you have any Snapchat, Instagram, TikTok, whatever, let's say you have 500 people following you or 1,000 or 20, spreading a message or telling people what you consider to be important is doing something. That's praxis. That's activism. You don't have to protest as part of a crowd in the street. You can do it from your phone if you want. You could do it to an individual, just sticking up for what you believe in. If you're having a conversation with someone and they don't understand something, or they have a conflicting opinion, you can describe how you feel about a situation, like, oh, corporations are bad because of this. So don't stick up against your own, class interests. And that's also a long time project, is convincing enough people in the United States that unions are good. Republicans have been fairly successful in their propaganda to convince people that everything good for them is actually bad, like socialism and communism and unions and workers' rights. The first thing you get from a Republican when you ask, should workers have rights, is no, because they won't end up making as much profit for the company. Republicans have just been turned into these finger puppets for corporations that spout all their talking points, become their own little propaganda machines. Exactly. Seeing as we've reached the end of the
show, right? So then, right on time. So we will continue this conversation again, not taking side on the left agenda or the right wing propagandas, right? Let's go through this process and explore more, and also more to come on our experiment lab. We will be inviting experts and special guests and talk more on this.
Getting experts on is always nice.
All right. Thank you all. Bye for now.